Hey everyone! Alright, I'm back with some more Let's Listen to Tim talk about random crap. While he has Dungeon Hack on in the background. I got my 20-ounce bottle of Cherry Coke Zero. Very tasty to help keep me awake on this June 28th, 2022. As I talk to you guys about this game and other Dungeons and Dragons related stuff for the most part, I think, in this video. Before we get going, two things really quick. The first one is I realized after I had been done recording the last episode that I spent the vast majority of it talking to the comments I got on it. I don't want the series to become me just talking to comments, or you guys won't get any stories. You guys will only get me talking to your comments instead, and that's fine. If I wanted this series to be that sort of thing, but I feel like I'm betraying you if I do that. I meant to talk more about my opinions on like Dungeons and Dragons stuff, and for you guys to find out more about me and some of the things that I've done. And so to that end, we're going to refocus back to random Dungeons and Dragons stuff for the most part. And starting from this episode and forward. But I will still be watching with you guys as we're playing through this game, so I can talk about the stuff we see. And on that note, that was, I think they're called an Otog in front of us. Normally in Dungeons & Dragons, I think it might be a greater one. These creatures can cause all sorts of nasty diseases to you. I don't think there's disease in this game. There's no cure disease spell, which would normally be available to clerics, I think, at 3rd level. And I don't think these things can poison us either. They're just slow, tanky, decent damage-dealing creatures in this game. And the other creature that we saw flying around, I think, is an apparition, is what it's called. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's what it is. And the apparitions are one of the few creatures that can cast spells at us. They will cast ice storm spells, which can do a significant amount of cold damage. Thankfully, because we're playing... I'm going to keep teasing the game a bit, everyone. I apologize if you are a fan of Dungeon Hack, but because we're playing the most balanced class of Cleric Mage, our Resist Cold spell will go a long way to helping us resist the damage this thing deals. We may even have 1 or 2 protection from cold scrolls on Meg somewhere. Hope you guys like that sound effect too. That's the sound the Oitogs make, and the other one was a sound that the apparitions make as they're flying around. Alright, so... Let's go back to the 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons, everyone. When I left off at that 2 episodes ago, I was talking about some of the various things I don't like about the game. A heads up that, by the way, that when we pick up and throw the hammer, it counts as if we are throwing it. Oh, we are about to die. We're about to die. Trying to stand there and tank, Tim? You can't do that in a real-time first-person dungeon crawl grid-based combat game. That's not the way that works. You gotta run around and not get hit. Right. So I guess this lets me segue very nicely into the last topic about 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons that I wasn't a huge fan of. Was, and it's weird too because I do like the system. I just didn't like the odds. The Thaco. And Thaco itself, and I'll get to this a little bit later because I'm going to start talking about the things I liked about 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons. The Thaco itself is fine. I thought 2-hit armor class 0 was a perfectly fine system to utilize to tell if you hit a creature or not. I just didn't really like the hit chances that it had by default in the game. So, as an example, a level 4 fighter. So keep in mind, you've already killed some things. You've gone on an adventure or two, and you're level 4. And the fighter is supposed to be one of his strong point is hitting creatures and dealing damage, right? In base vanilla 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, that's what fighters did. You hit things until they stop moving, and then you hit them to make sure they didn't get back up again. And that's how you got your experience points, assuming you weren't picking up gold off the ground. But let's say that fighter has a strength in Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition of 18, /23. If you don't know what that means, it would take me 5 minutes to explain. So let's just go with it. So he has a +1 to hit, basically, given his strength of 18. And we'll also give him a magic weapon. Let's give him a +1 magic weapon to go along with that strength. And let's say he's fighting a goblin. A goblin is one of the weaker enemies I can think of in vanilla 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons. So let's pretend that goblin has, say, an armor class of 7. So he's wearing leather armor and probably has a shield. Doesn't have a high dex. He's a goblin. He's supposed to be killed. I'm sorry, goblin. That's what you're there for. So it's not a very good armor class, 7. But the fighter has a THAC of 17 at level 4, and with a +2 to hit that goblin, he's got to roll an 8+ on a 20-sided dice. So that's roughly a 65% chance to hit. And that's not very good. Like, sure, you'll hit more often than you won't, but it's like it's almost like you're flipping a coin, like the one we left on the ground right there, to hit the creature. I mean, that doesn't seem very good to me. That seems very punishing for a fighter to have that hit chance. If you were playing a game like, let's say you're playing XCOM, right, and your sniper has a 65% chance to hit a creature with a sniper rifle, like, you know that's not a good chance, and you're looking around to see what on earth you could do to make that chance better. In this case, it's just roll high. We need you to roll high, fighter, so you can kill the very easy-to-kill goblin. Thankfully, with his 18-23 strength and the +1 weapon, he is more likely than not to kill the thing. But still, I never liked the odds that were involved with straight fighters attacking and hitting creatures in the early levels especially. Later on, fighters got to make multiple attacks per round. I think many of the different types of classes did. Well, or maybe I think it was only fighters got multi attacks. So, I think it was a level 6 and below fighter, you got 1 attack per round. Once you hit level 7, you made 3 attacks for every 2 rounds that elapsed. So your first round in combat would start, you roll for initiative, everyone would see what initiative order they're going in. A fighter would be able to make 2 attacks that first round. So you swing at a creature, you get to roll 2 20-sided dice. I think that's the way it worked, and I changed the rules myself for my game, so I'm going on memory here. And so, and then the next round, you would get 1 attack that round. Roll 1 20-sided dice, determine how much damage you do if you hit, and so on and so forth. So fighters could eventually become decent damage dealers because the sheer number of attacks they would be putting out. But early on, man, it was really tough to hit even easy to hit creatures if the dice didn't like you. But I guess in a way, like that's one of also, to be fair to 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons, that's one of the joys of playing the game, is just, okay, it's RNG, and you feel really great when your fighter hits like 5 times in a row, especially if 2 of those times were natural 20s. You feel really awful when you roll like 8 10s in a row, and it's just not good enough to hit the creature who has an armor class of 4 who's standing in front of you. It's, oh man. It can be tough. This is also one of the reasons why the Dungeon Master, in my case, for example, me, if the Dungeon Master is a more lenient Dungeon Master, has everything behind his screen. This way, and his players hopefully realize that a 10 might hit sometimes, but not other times, if the Dungeon Master is doing a little bit of number fudging, as it were, in the background, to let you hit when he's feeling bad that these creatures are just these easy creatures, tar pit creatures, trash mobs, should be being killed a lot easier than they are, or a lot faster than they are. On that note, when it came to like some mage spells also, having such a limited amount of spells meant that if a creature got a saving throw off against it, you went from dealing decent damage to it to dealing okay damage to it, depending upon the creature, what spell you had cast at it. So that can be kind of a letdown too. So were thief skills at the lowest levels. I never really enjoyed that very much either. It's really important that a thief be able, especially because a thief's not as good in combat as a fighter, doesn't have access to spells like a mage, doesn't have any healing to contribute to the group like a cleric, so he's there for the miscellaneous use, getting you into locks, opening up chests, fighting and avoiding traps so the group doesn't die or take large amounts of damage, or other such things. But early on, man, a level 4 thief generally has less than 50% chance to succeed at almost all of his skills, with the exception of, say, climbing walls, which I think started at 60%, but most of them were starting at like 10. And at level 4, let's see here, if I can do the math in my head out loud to you guys at the same time. A level 1 thief gets 90% points to place in his various skills, and there's 8 points by default, 8 skills to put points into. And then every time you level, is it 9? No, I'm sorry, 60%. 60% points to place in your starting skills at level 1. And then every level thereafter, you get 30%, according to vanilla Dungeons & Dragons. So this means that your thief at level 4, what is that? That's 30 times 90, 150% points to place in those skills. So an example, you have Detect Noise at level 1, that skill's at like 5%. And at level 4, you could have increased that skill by, let's say, 20%, taking away 20 from your 150% of points that you'll be able to place into different skills. I hope I'm making sense. I'm sure most of you probably already know what I'm talking about. Though I am curious, I don't think they kept these like percentage skills in Dungeons & Dragons going forward. Maybe they actually made it better or easier for thieves. 3rd edition, if I'm basing what I know around Star Wars: The Old Republic, which is like one of the only 3rd edition games I played for any length of time, they had things like Spot, which is what a thief would use to detect traps, if I recall correctly. But anyone could do it. Just thieves had a better chance to do it because they could put more numbers into that skill, because it was an in-class skill. So every 1 point they put in it, they could get a +1 to the roll of it. I think I liked the 3rd edition change to thieves, if what I'm saying is accurate there, because those numbers were really low for 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons. Still felt great when you made it, when you made those rolls. And this also became another important aspect of your character in 2nd edition, was high statistics for the class you were playing, because a thief wants like a 17, at the very least a 16 dexterity, because you get small percentage bonuses to all your skills at that point. You also had, in vanilla 2nd edition, armor penalties. Depending upon the armor you were wearing, your stats, your statistics would be affected by it. So, for example, if you were wearing studded leather armor, your chance to detect traps dropped. Your chance to climb walls dropped. Whereas if you weren't wearing any armor, those numbers were either unaffected for the most part, or you had a small improvement to them. So I guess it's just really tough for lower level characters in vanilla 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons to hit things, and to get your thieves, for thieves to make their skill checks. And mages needed to make sure, or prayed to make sure, that the creatures would not make saving throws against their spells. On that note, also, like clerics in vanilla 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons, as we mentioned earlier, as you can see here with Meg, Cure Light Wounds, like, that's it. That's what you got. Unless the Dungeon Master is going to be very nice with the amount of healing potions you find, or gives you a wand of curing or something to that effect. You're not healing very much either. It was really rough to low levels. Man, it's a lot more 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons that I remember disliking. Talking about it. So what on earth did I like about 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons, Tim? I hear all of you now saying, as we're fighting another apparition here. Okay, well, before we can talk about what I liked about 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons, I do have to have a little bit of a forewarning / preamble here. Because, as you all know, I heavily modified my game. As I grew older, I made more and more alterations to my Dungeons & Dragons game. So it's it's a bit like as if I was to talk about Darkest Dungeon. Adorkable has been around on my channel back when I was playing Darkest Dungeon. And Darkest Dungeon was a game I backed on Kickstarter some like 10 years ago. And I got the beta, and I've been playing through the beta. But the only time I played an unmodded version of the game was during the beta. Once I figured out how to change things in that game, I did so, and I refused to play Darkest Dungeon without my mod in effect. We'll talk about Darkest Dungeon some other time. I'll make a little note here on my notes to mention Darkest Dungeon in the future. There we go. Nope, that's it. I mean, Darkest Dungeon will be here another hour talking about that game, and I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons stuff in this video. So let's look at that instead. All right, so here we go. All right, so what do I remember and what do I like about Second Edition Dungeons and Dragons? So the most important aspect about it that I like is the rule set structure is great, and the definitions and charts, while sometimes conflicting, are generally very good. And I liked the way that the ideas were presented therein. So, we just talked about THAC0, for example. And although I feel THAC0 is rather punishing, given the hit chances, I do like that it makes sense. I liked being able to understand what I was looking at when a creature had their THAC0 listed there, and I knew what my players would require in order to be able to hit a creature, for example. It made sense, and I just wish that there were more bonuses applied to it, to allow the hit chances to be a little higher. I like the way that different weapons did their damage, and the indicator what type of damage that weapon was. A spear did piercing damage, a club did blunt damage. They did different. You rolled different dice depending upon what weapon you were using. I like the idea of like the speed factors on your weapon to determine how fast you were able to swing them. I liked the idea that to really benefit from certain statistics, you need to have high numbers in them, or rather, perhaps that's the wrong way to phrase that. The higher the statistic, the more benefits you got from it. It was the very first time I was encountering something of this sort in a game. I never played anything like a role-playing game before Dungeons and Dragons, and I like the idea of representing different attributes of a person via strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma. I like the idea as well that, in 2nd edition at least, that the average character tended to be within the ranges of like 8 and 12. So most average rolls, your character would be considered average and wouldn't have any benefits or penalties for being an average character. Didn't feel very heroic with that, but that's why I also used a point buy system for my players. Once I was a bit older, I stopped using rolling for stats even when I was really young. I didn't like the idea of rolling for stats because it was just too random what my brothers sometimes would get. So I would just let them have like a high number or 2 or 3 high numbers and then roll for other stats instead that we didn't care very much about. We were young. It's funny. I'm a small tangent. We were young. Me and my brothers always considered charisma the dump stat. Who cares about charisma? We also all jokingly always believed, and I said in my edition of the game, that charisma determines how cute you are. I understand it's supposed to be how charismatic you are, but everyone knows that your 6 charisma character is just really ugly. That's my opinion on charisma. There you have it. So we always use it as a dump stat. These days, though, none of my brothers who made their characters, they all had at least a 14 in charisma. None of us were willing to see a character, because I have an NPC in the game as well that I'm using as me, effectively. So I'm playing him as more of a silent character because I don't want to determine the outcome of any events as they occur. But in any case, we all have charismas of at least 14. We want our guys to be cute. we don't want, want ugly characters walking around. Anyway, more on this. I like the idea of different classes having their hit point rolls and numbers, and I like the charts that went along with it. I understood how the experience points were supposed to work. Once I was a little older than 11, I understood how the spells memorization charts worked. A little tangent here as well. When I was young, it made sense to me that the number on the spell for the spell levels that you saw when you leveled up was the new number of them that you got in addition to all the old numbers that you had. Because very, very young me, we're talking like 12 or age 13 Tim, couldn't understand why a mage would only have 2 first level spells at level 2. He should surely have 3. And at level 3, he should have 1 second level spell, and he should have 5 first level spells. I kept adding the next character level spell allotment to the previous one. So like a level 7 cleric would have like 48 first level spells. Is I think like it wasn't that many, but you get the idea of how I was doing the math wrong. My goodness. Might have been a bit more fun to play low-level casters if I had done it that way, now that I think about it. But I did not, but that's not the way it's supposed to go. But what I'm trying to get at is I liked the mechanics. I liked the way they were explained, and I thought that they were, on the whole, they made sense. And that framework, I very much enjoyed. We're walking on noise-making ground at the moment, which causes us to take some damage. Here in Dungeon Hack. The list goes on and on for a whole host of things that I never would have come up with myself. Like item saving throws in general, just the different types of thief skills. I liked all of the ideas, even if I disagreed somewhat on the numbers. And it occurs to me that I've carried this type of mentality with me to a host of other games. It's why I've been working on my own version of Heroes Quest for a decade now. I have modded rules for all of my, looking over there, my Way of the Tiger book series, my Lone Wolf book series, Greystar the Wizard. I have a bunch of homebrewed rules in an attempt to tweak the game mechanics there. Because once again, I like the structure, but I didn't think these things were balanced so well. And it just goes on and on. And so, as a dungeon master as well, I began to rapidly understand, even very young me, at like age 13 or 14, that a DM changes these rules to suit the players and the campaign he is trying to run. It also means that you need to talk with your players to make sure that things feel balanced and fair for everyone involved. If you make a new character class, you want to make sure that, number one, the players like the class if they're playing them, and number two, that it's balanced. You don't want to have an unbalanced class that ruins the entire feeling of the campaign, especially if other characters are not quite as. Some character classes are more balanced than others, right? This is the case for most video games and most role-playing games I think I have been in, and an exception for my own, of course. No, absolutely not. It is very difficult to make everything exactly balanced. There will always be something that's a little more powerful than others. Very tricky to balance everything 100%. Though I feel, oh god, that's 3 apparitions. We do not want to be there. I'm going to need, what am I doing right now? I don't know what I'm doing. I guess we're going to have to try fighting 3 apparitions. If I can pull just 2 of them, that makes this a lot better. Some of the enemies in this game, as you can see, stack. When enemies do stack, I believe they can stack up to 4. I want room to maneuver around these. Hope we can kill one here. Nope, we hit a different one. Oh, we missed. Darn Thaco Rose. Ooh, Meg. Sorry, I'm paying attention to this. This really matters to me, apparently. Whew. Alright, we did it. One of them walked into a teleporter, so we'll have to worry about... Oh, we'll worry about that later. I didn't talk about this aspect of Dungeon Hack really quick. So before I talk more about things I liked, we're going to talk a little bit about Dungeon Hack here, apparently. So This floor we've been on is a teleportation floor. For as random as most of these levels are, the teleportation levels they're not the same, but they follow almost the same. If it's not the same layout, it feels very similar with the number of teleporters and how they're spaced in these different rooms. Almost all of the teleportation maps or levels in this game, for example, have a big open T corridor in the center of plus sign. It's a long hallway that goes from the north to the south and the east to the west, cutting directly through the center of the level, similar to as if you put a XY axis, not map, I guess this axis is the proper way to say it, on it. Alright, this level is not one that has those, but it does have some teleporters in it. But most of the teleporter levels are exactly the same, and it's a bit boring to get another one of those teleportation levels. Teleportations also have the issue in that it works very similarly to going down into the floor of a dungeon, because when you walk through a teleporter, whatever is on the other side of that gets a chance to hit you, which can be very frustrating depending upon the class you are, what you're fighting throughout this level. If you're fighting cockatrice or say an undead like a wraith, man, that's every time you walk through a teleporter, that's a chance there could be a horrible monster on the other side that level drains you or kills you outright. So but you can disable teleporters. So if you don't like that idea, just take them off your game. Okay, so other things I liked was the whole idea of turning undead. Turning undead is one of the few rules and charts that I never adjusted. I absolutely love the idea of it. Since I'm Catholic, I love the idea of a cleric turning undead. I really like the rules and numbers. I thought it was great, and I love the idea it could fail. Your god has abandoned you, or you just weren't strong enough in your faith to repulse it, or the undead was able to resist it. As a dungeon master, I really like when the monsters sometimes can laugh at the players and their attempts to defeat them. Not that I do that very often. I always favor my players, but sometimes it's fun just to have that effect. So, and I like the idea of saving throws. The whole idea that there are things which can occur to your character, which a hit roll is not the appropriate thing to use to make that determination. Now that said, what the different categories was a bit confusing in 2nd edition, but I still kept it that way. Like, what were the saving throws? It was there were 5 categories. It was poison, paralysis, and death ray was the first one. A second one was magic wands, staves, and rods. The third one, assuming we live through this. Oh, and we did. The third one was polymorph and petrification. The fourth one was breath weapon. And the final one was spells, if I recall correctly. So I tended to have my own rules as to which saving throw my players would have to go against. Breath weapon I used as whenever my characters need to make a saving throw to see if they could roll out of the way of something, I used breath weapon. If it was a spell effect, that was spells. If it was something that was attempting to slow them down, that would be petrification or polymorph. And if it was like luck, like trying to avoid a rock that was falling on top of them, like because they disturbed some rubble, then that was a save against magic wands, staves, and rods, for example. So I broke these up into trying to get them. I tried to make them a little more consistent in what they would roll for, because the odds of you actually encountering something that would use a wand, staff, or rod against you was extraordinarily low in the game, if I recall correctly. I think on this note, I like the change that I believe 3rd edition did. Once again, if I look at the Star Wars The Old Republic as the game that I am most familiar with who used a modified version of 3rd edition rules, I liked their will, reflex, and fortitude saves. So you make reflex saves to try to dodge something, will saves to try to resist like a mind-affecting spell or charm, and fortitude against things like poison. And I liked that. Actually, I'm surprised I haven't used that in my edition of the game, to be quite honest. Maybe I'll spend some time looking at my home rules again and changing it. I like the way in which armor and dexterity determines your armor class, although I do feel that heavier armors should restrict the amount of benefit your dexterity grants to you. In Vanilla Second Edition, you could be wearing full plate mail, and to my knowledge, your dexterity still lets you have a lower armor class value, despite the fact that you're going to be moving rather slow due to it, and it's rather clumsy, for example. I think, yeah, once again, 3.5, I think, addressed this sort of thing, if I recall correctly. Now, I still liked the idea. So I'm talking mostly from a mechanic standpoint, is what I really enjoyed about the second edition Dungeons & Dragons stuff. What do you guys think of the hit sound effects in Dungeon Hack? You like them? It's good sound effects. I don't think there's any way to lower sound effect volumes in this game. It's either on or off, if I recall correctly. Yes, yep. This game was made during a period of time when we used sound blasters. And I don't remember a way to adjust the volume in the game itself. You would just have to lower the volume on your computer. I'm looking for an illusionary wall, and I don't see any there. Now, that's a new sound effect. I don't know what it is, but it makes me nervous that we're going to fight something that can kill me instantly. So we have to take a teleporter? I'm looking around to see how to get into that. Okay, no one cares. Let's go back to Dungeons & Dragons stuff. I liked the weapon and non-weapon proficiencies that Second Edition had. The idea that your character was spending some time learning things that were not just being what their class was. They had hobbies or other interests or some type of career besides being an adventurer. And finally, the settings. The setting? I'm sorry. Well, that's correct. The game settings. I don't know how way to describe it. Like the worlds. I really liked reading about them, even though I didn't use any of them except for, well, 2. Because 2 of the campaign settings could be used in any type of campaign. Right? Yeah. Yep. So I designed my own world. I had my own gods, my own continent, a bunch of my own lore for the world that existed, and so on and so forth. But it was based around, oh god, 2 apparitions. You know, if we hadn't found that fire gauntlet, the fire giant strength gauntlets, this would have been a nightmare to get through this level. Yep, it's gonna be fun. I gotta walk to the teleporter and take all these hits while trying to kill these 2 things. I want to watch this battle. Yep. If I die, we will just restart over once and once only. Something's attacking me from behind. I don't know what it is. Holy crap, it's a Medusa. And it went in the teleporter. So, thankfully, we weren't turned to stone when it was busy attacking me earlier. I think it can turn you to stone even if you are not facing it. There is a small chance we can telefrag the Medusa if we walk through the teleporter and end up on top of it, and it wasn't able to move out of the way. So, we will probably try that, yep, because there's a way down, and I want whatever loot it drops. Well, oh wow, I'm going to even equip a Slay Living spell to help me here. Alright, it resisted. That sucks. Another reason why I don't like, why, being a mage can be a bit frustrating. You can have a very powerful spell, but against the things that you really want to cast it on, they're going to be a higher level, which means they have a higher chance to resist, which means that, well, they're not as useful as they would otherwise be. If you get one Slay Living spell, and it takes you like a day to rememorize it, you'd hope it would work when you really need to kill a living thing. And right there, that tells me that the Medusa died. It walked through the teleporter and was telefragged. This creature might have actually killed it when it walked through it. What did it drop? We have a mace. We'll identify that mace. No, we won't. Not with that armor on, Tim. What is it? Mace +2. We'll hold on to that. And the shield. I'm a little nervous about the shield. I can tick it off my character, so it's not cursed. Okay. Yeah, so I like the 2nd edition's different worlds that they created. I was a big fan of Spelljammer in particular. I just liked how crazy it was. Once again, the systems associated with it I really liked. I liked the hex grid. It was, I think Spelljammer was my first, like, miniature game, if I stop to think about it. Which plays nicely adorkable with what you were saying, how 2nd edition was designed, Dungeons & Dragons was designed around miniature gaming at first. I like the idea that you could go to all these different worlds. I like that when the ship left the atmosphere, it took with it a bubble of that atmosphere around it, based around, like, how the mass of the ship. And you would be able to fly to different planets. I really liked it. It was a bit crazy. I know many other people don't like it, but I thought it was rather unique. And something about me is the more unique the setting or the gameplay mechanics, the more I'm going to enjoy them. I like it when, even though I sometimes think that games fail to reach the lofty goals they set, I do like when games try to break the boundaries or try to push something in regards to gameplay in some fashion or try something new. Like when System Shock was one of the first games I think that had like an inventory system for an FPS, if I recall correctly, right? Like you actually had System Shock 2. I never played the original System Shock, so System Shock 2 is what I mean. Like you had an inventory where you could move things around in it and so on. And I really liked that idea, along with the whole leveling up of your statistics. I had encountered that before. My earlier games were like Duke Nukem 3D and what have you. And, well, you could carry all the weapons on your character there. You didn't have to worry about space in that game, for example. So, the whole idea of Spelljammer was rather unique. I liked it very much. All right, I guess that summarizes why I mention why 2nd edition is the best edition. It's because I really have enjoyed the systems and mechanics that the game laid out. I thought they were easily understandable, and the charts made sense. I might not have liked the numbers on some of these. Oh, it's this floor. So I hope you guys like the sound effect. That is a slug ogre. They take half damage, I think, from blunt weapons. And we're a cleric. That's what we use. And so it's going to take us a while to chew through them. So we just saw it'll take anywhere from 4 to 5 hits to kill a slug ogre. So I hope you guys like slug ogres. But they're not, of course, the only thing down on this floor. That's the other thing. Medusa. So we have a floor filled with slug ogres and Medusa. Slug ogres also do a significant amount of damage if they hit you. So this is going to be tricky. We can't let a single Medusa hit us, or there's a chance we'd get turned to stone. And slug ogres, we would rather not tank them if we can avoid it. Missing is not going to help us very much, Meg. Just saying. Alright. Thankfully, they take full damage, so it looks like 3 swings, 3 hits will be enough to kill it. Can you imagine how bored you must be to be one of these creatures in this dungeon? All you do is just walk around down these hallways endlessly. While you and your friends and the other creatures you're here with just make the same sound effects. There's nothing. There's no tables. There's no entertainment. There's no desks to put your stuff on. You're carrying it all with you all the time. It must be really, really boring. Right. So we got just about another 45 minutes. Or what are we going to talk about? I think we will start getting into things that I changed in my edition of the game, just in case you guys are curious about it. Who was the person who commented? I think it was. No, I don't know who it was. I want to make sure I get the name right. So, you guys will just have to like, hopefully some of the background stuff going on at the moment. Mason G. It was Mason G. Mason G mentioned that he developed a mana system, like my own, for Dungeons & Dragons. But he had also made it such that if you cast the same spell repeatedly, it would drain additional mana from you. I like that idea. That would encourage the players to change up the spells that they were casting. I probably have a hard time actually doing that, though, based on how I had my mages with their spells in their spell books. Because there was a limit to the amount of spells they could put in their spell books based on how many pages they put in them, which was linked to how much money they would have early on. So they would have to end up casting like 1 or 2 combat spells repeatedly, depending upon what encounter they were in. So I probably couldn't do the same thing, but I loved hearing that someone else had the same idea as I did. And as I go forward with what I'm going to describe, it occurs to me that a lot of what I've altered with 2nd edition was also done in like 3rd edition. Some of these changes were introduced. So keep that in mind as you hear what I'm saying. I like the idea that the developers or game designers for Dungeons & Dragons also were making similar changes. Perhaps they too realized some of the issues. I don't want to call it issues, but some of the things could be done a bit differently, and they did some of the similar changes that I had done. So, first thing I think I should mention is that as I look over at my notes, when leveling your characters up, your characters, a character would get 0.25 added to a stat. And so it was possible after every 4 levels that you could level a stat up a point. In this way, my characters would always be trying to get their statistics up a little higher. And I like that it would show their characters improving in this way. I think 3rd edition introduced it, and I think it might still be the case that current editions of D&D do this as well. But I did that way back in the 1990s. On that note, there was no benefit to having a stat not improved to the next level unless it was strength, because I kept this strength percentage chart for determining how much damage you would do. So, and it required more than 4 points put into strength once it hit 18 to get your strength up to 19. Once a stat was at 19, there was no other way to improve it through leveling. It would have to be something like a wish spell or some special divine favor or something that would allow you to go past a 19. 19 was the peak of your mortal's ability to improve a statistic. On that note, we're going to talk a little bit about non-weapon proficiencies. I liked the idea, once again, of your characters having hobbies or some other type of career, something else that they were interested in and wanted to pursue, besides just hacking things with a sword or casting magic missile over and over again, for example. And so I improved a great many of the non-weapon proficiencies in the game to give them additional benefits besides just being background information. So, for example, in the vanilla Dungeons and Dragons, blind fighting was one of the few skills that my players would take because it conferred some sort of benefit to the actual game besides just being background information for the characters. Another example was swimming, right? If you didn't take swimming, your character didn't know how to swim, and most people didn't want that. So most of the players, back before I had designed, so it would be basically just my brothers plus a few of my other friends when I was growing up in like high school, they would take blind fighting, swimming, and reading and writing would be 3 skills that non-weapon proficiencies that they would all take because there was some benefit they could actually tangibly get with their characters as they played the game. So I added a bunch of other passive benefits to these skills. Dancing, for example, would give you an extra 0.25 to your dexterity score, or basically 1/4 of a stat point to leveling up that score 1 more point. And if taken at character creation, then it was something that I considered their character had an interest in for a longer period of time, and it would give them double the benefit for taking it at character creation than waiting until they leveled up to take that skill. Additional languages besides your races, your character's race's initial language, which you got for free, would also confer to you either a 0.25 increase to your intelligence or charisma, the player's choice, when they took that extra language. Leatherworking would allow a player to maintain the leather armors of his party. They would be able to repair damage they would take, and would also grant a further -1 bonus to all the non-magical leather armors that that character or other characters in the group would be wearing at the time. And I did this for a large portion of the non-weapon proficiencies. Now that I'm looking at my chart, or rather I see I have in my notes that I should go and revisit my non-weapon proficiencies again in order to improve some of them, because not all of them got the same level of attention when it comes to being tempting to take it, for example. So see, even I still have balance issues, even to this day, despite the fact that I've been working on... Well, I haven't been working on this for years. But having designed this, there's still always room for improvement. My non-weapon proficiencies had 2 ranks to them each, an apprentice level and a master level. Not all skills had such, but many did. Blind fighting only had 1 skill only had 1 rank associated with it, though, for example. But if you had taken master leatherworking, in other words, you spent a second non-weapon proficiency on that single proficiency, then you would be able to improve the armor class of even non-magical armors. And if you had taken that skill during character creation, you started with a non-magical suit of leather armor that granted an additional bonus of -2 to its armor class, and could have some reduced thief penalties, skills to thief penalties associated with it. Another example is mining. In addition to being able to be a foreman over mining operations, which is what I think the book was trying to describe, taking a skill would give you either a bonus of 0.25 to your intelligence, your strength, or constitution scores when chosen. And at master level, it would grant a 0.25 to all 3 of them, in addition to whatever it was that you had chosen at the apprentice level. Weapon proficiencies were another thing I liked and I expanded upon in my edition of D&D. So, there was a new stat, which I've added only recently. Well, I think it was about 1.5 years ago, when I've been looking at my mana system. I wanted my players to... So originally... okay, let's back up a little bit. So, I added a bunch of new types of weapon proficiencies. Things that were not just using a weapon, but things that I classified as taking a weapon proficiency slot. One of these things were special attacks. So there's an ability called Twist the Blade, where if you're using a piercing melee weapon, you can use this to inflict an extra die of damage, whatever that whatever it rolls to your damage rolls. There's another ability called Cleave, which would add the character's strength score, their damage modifier, a second time to what the damage was. And I originally had this balanced around a cooldown. You would only be able to use these skills every, like, third turn in combat. But eventually, I tried to design a stamina system for my characters and these different classes, which was based around their constitution, their max hit points they could have, and their charisma scores. Different stat lines there, and I think it'll work. It's working so far for my low-level characters, but I can already see that high-level characters can do a whole lot more of this. It might be a bit unbalanced, but I'll tweak it as I go forward. But let me talk a little bit more about these things. So, there were counterattacks, and you would be able to use these whenever your character was... Well, not whenever. But let's remember, everyone, that these were cooldown-based originally, and I've added, since they're no longer cooldown-based, now they are stamina-based. Counterattacks were something you could use when your character was struck, which would give you a benefit of some sort. One of them was called You'll Pay for That. And when you used it, you get a +3 to hit, a +2 to damage, and doubles the critical hit chance of your character against a foe that just hit you. Another one was Now It's My Turn, which you take an immediate attack back against the attacker, but you gain no... you have to use your straight THAC0 against the attacker. So in other words, you don't get any benefit from strength or magic weapon bonuses. Now that I'm thinking about it, I probably should remove that. You probably should get benefits for everything. But I can increase the stamina cost for it. Well, anyway, I'm just giving you examples of what I've done. I can worry about balancing this off screen. There were still weapon expertise, so you could take a very specific weapon, and your character would get a benefit to hit, to damage, and speed factor would all be lowered with it. There was also battle shouts. So your character would shout, like, remember your training, and it would grant yourself and all the other characters who were friendly to you, who heard you shout that, a +1 to hit, a -1 to your speed factor with your current weapon, and a -1 bonus to your armor class. And these battle shouts would last 3 combat turns. You could only be affected by a single one at any one time. And so my idea was to try to make characters feel like they could contribute a little more in combat for my players who were the character classes that were combat focused, by allowing them to do more things in combat besides just declare a target and roll to see if they hit it. Which actually, I guess some of this actually still is, but it adds more theme and feeling to the characters. And my players have really liked dropping points into different types of characters to make certain types of templates, because I have defensive and offensive types of these skills. And so one of my brothers, he has a character who has a battle shout called "Get behind my shield" or "Get behind me," and he provides his own shield bonus to the character he is guarding. And if that character is targeted and hit, he can elect to take the damage that character would have suffered otherwise. Anyway, there's a bunch more of these, but I'm not going to cover every single one of them. It's just the idea that I'm trying to get across, where I've added a bunch. I try to add a bit more variety and more choices for my players to make their characters feel a little more unique, but at the same time trying to add more versatility to them in different combat situations. And I'm trying to make everything worth considering when it comes to leveling up. I've always preferred when games have mostly, once again, it's really difficult to perfectly balance things, but having a few, like, in second editions, there's some spells which are not very useful compared to other spells, and I don't like that idea. I want everything to be tempting to take. I want everything to have a certain... At the very least, I want everything to feel like it could be equally useful in certain situations, which has not been the case all the time in the various games that I'm playing. Some things are much more useful than others. Some classes are much more useful than others. Here in Dungeon Hack, our Cleric Mage is much more likely to get to the end of the game and win than a pure fighter ever would. We've talked about my mana system, so I don't feel like I should probably talk about that again. I do have a host of custom character classes. I'm not going to get into them because it would take way too long. I don't think you guys care about the specifics. But I don't have a basic fighter class in the game, for example. All the classes have some extra bonuses, with one or two of the classes having some penalties, depending upon what class it is. And classes are race-specific for some of them as well. Like a dwarven runesmith can't be a human if you're going to pick that class. I like the idea that some clans and or races or households or whatever terminology you want to use have something specific that they share only amongst themselves with others of their faction. And so I have this limitation as well for some of my classes. Leveling is done differently in my version of Dungeons & Dragons, and I'm pretty sure that I was inspired by this because of Pool of Radiance. When you level up, you don't immediately gain all the perks of leveling up. You are just flagged as being able to be leveled up, and then you have to go and find someone to train you. There's a cost in order to be trained. That cost in the past was, well, the cost is either money or it's some sort of special task that you have to do. Generally, however, it's going to be paying some amount of money for the time spent for your trainer to train you. And then I would have a little bit of like flavor text as to what that would involve. For one of my friends who was role-playing a character who was a sage, they were basically a cleric who could cast magic user spells from certain spell schools, in addition to getting access to some miscellaneous clerical spell school spheres. God, I hope that makes sense to you. But when he leveled up, he was able to access the privileged section of the library, and his trainer would have him read certain books, which my player would determine would have to give me the names of. I'll make him like, all right, Jim, like you're leveling up. You want to learn spells from this spell school, so you're gonna have to give me like 2 or 3 names of the books that you are looking like just for flavor reasons that you're looking to find in the library. So I would make my players think a little bit and give me some more lore to work with. This way, in the future, maybe one of those books was stolen, and I could consult with what books he had studied, so he recognizes the name, if nothing else. What else is there? My undead don't drain experience points. Any of the ones that would normally do so drain stats instead. And you slowly recover those statistics as well over time at the rate of 1/4 a point per day that you rest, or that you're not being hurt by that stat isn't being drained again. So after 1 day, for example, if a wraith drained 2 points of Constitution from one of my players, it would take 8 days for that Constitution score to be back up to its fullest. After 1 day, it would have recovered 1 point of Constitution loss. I felt that was first off, it was more lenient, which I liked, and it required significantly less bookkeeping. It also made me feel significantly less guilty by throwing things like shadows or shades at my players, since I wouldn't have to... Well, did shadows? No, shadows never drained levels. They always drained strength. But I could throw like a white at my players and not have to worry that they would be really pissed for having their level drained. As a Dungeon Master, you do have to keep in mind how happy your players are with you, with the monsters that you are throwing at them, with the campaign in general, and with the amount of loot that they're gaining. It's this really delicate balancing act of trying to understand what your players are looking for, while at the same time trying to make sure that you get to tell the story that you want as a Dungeon Master. It's this entire dichotomy between you, Dungeon Master, and your players. Never thought of that before. You really do help each other when you're doing a role-playing game. My players can have their items identified. I think this was also influenced by Pool of Radiance, Because in that game, you could bring your weapons or armor or magic items to any shopkeeper in Pool of Radiance, and they would immediately identify it for you if you had $200 to pay. So in my world, not every merchant could do that. There was only there were a few of them, or rather, there was oh crap! What's what I'm looking for? Oh man, I can't think of it. Career. There we go. There's a I guess it's the same name, but it's entirely different. A sage would be able to identify items. So my players would have a bunch of treasure. Some of it they know is magical. They decide to not, like, they don't put on the ring. They keep it separate. Then they will eventually find a sage in a town, depending upon what town or city they're in. There may or may not be a sage. Generally, they're in larger cities, not in like a farmstead out in the middle of nowhere. But they would then bring it to them, and they would have the item identified. There was always a chance, though, that the sage would not be able to correctly identify the item. Some sages were better than others, and I had a percentage roll written down to determine if the attempt was successful or not. Maybe one sage would be much cheaper, say 400 gold to identify an item as opposed to 1,000 gold. But in return for that, the chance of them correctly being able to identify it might be a little wrong. I never made it so that the item was completely off base, unless it was a cursed item. So, for example, a potion of flying, I'm sorry, a potion of levitation may be incorrectly identified as a potion of flying by the sage. So the effect is somewhat similar, but yet still different. A magic weapon +2 might be accidentally identified as +1, for example. And we could have died right there, because the game lagged, thanks to me casting a spell while the door's shut. And a bunch of our fireballs are just missing utterly. Because you can't... I don't think Medusa are immune to fire if they don't have natural fire resistance. Or fire immunity, so... Or magic immunity, either, for that matter. This room, this singular room, is going to take me another 10 minutes to get through. Because there's a spawn point somewhere near here. And the game consistently and endlessly is spawning giant slugs or Medusa in this room. Or very close to it. I guess I'll ruin this really quick. We do get through this floor. And I was not happy with, I wasn't very happy at the meanness of the game at this point. This is a rather awful floor. Something I've done during campaigns, this is not really a rule change, is that I used to hand out notes to my players based on things that they did. So, if a player casted Detect Magic, I would hand that player a note, which would detail what they saw. Most of the time, I would have these sorts of notes already written, ready to be shown to my players, because I instinctively had a good idea of what my players would cast at any particular time. And I didn't want to read out loud to my players what it was that they would find, because I felt like that wasn't the other players. The other players shouldn't know what the Detect Magic detected. It should be only that player. And while I realize that many players can separate what they know from what their character knows, it becomes quite evident what they alone knows if they are the only one who know it. And it's interesting to then, like, I'll hand one of my players the note, and he gets to describe what it is that his character sees to the other players, which further encourages the role-playing amongst them, and role-playing in their character in particular, which I really liked. I guess on this note, we'll talk a bit about some other things. As a dungeon master, other things I tend to do is I do track food and water that my players are consuming, but I tend to do it not every day. So, but you do have to carry food and drink with you. I do track, like, how many... If the players are going from point A to point B, unless something happens in between that could possibly rob them of that food or water, I don't track it. Once they reach point B, at that point, I'll subtract it from their from their charts. I do like the idea that there are small expenses that are ongoing, which, as adventurers, they need to be able to meet. So on that note as well, I like using material components for spells. It's a good way to add a little more tax to the players, as it were. Yeah, I think that Medusa appeared behind us, which is why I ran back to kill it. And we're still... I think everyone, for like another 10 minutes, we're going to be trying to get through this room. We've been here 10 minutes already, and we've another 10 minutes to go. Oh, man. I can say... I'm going to talk about Dungeon Hack for a little bit here. I can say for sure that I got my money's worth out of Dungeon Hack. Playing it again for about 20 or 23 hours or so with 4 different classes, it was a fun trip down memory lane. But I'm never going to play this ever again. If I'm in the mood to play a roguelike, oh my god, we have a Medusa coming behind us, and now I'm trapped in here. Wow. Oh, right. At this point, I've been trying to get through this one for so long, I just don't care anymore if I die. I'm like, fine, I'll start another Meg. We'll just start from scratch. I'll set the level limit to, like, 10 levels, and we'll just do this again, because I'm tired of trying to fight through this room. Yeah, I think, how expensive is this game on Steam? By the way, it's the Steam Summer Sale, everyone, today. Today is June 28th, 2022. The sale ends, I think, July 7th. I am going to check really quick, so if I go up here and I type in Dungeon Hack. Dungeon Hack is... it's DLC? Okay. It's part of the Forgotten Realms Collection Volume 3. It's $5 and you get a bunch of different games. What do you get? Mesoberizian. I can't pronounce that. And Dungeon Hack? Is it just those two? No, what do you get? Oh, yeah, you only get those 2 things. Well, that's not really a collection. That's like a pair. $5 gets you these 2 games. I can say, well, is it worth $5? I mean, I played it for 20 hours, everyone. I can say that I got $5 worth of entertainment out of it. That's for sure. So... and you guys are getting quite a few hours of entertainment, I hope, listening to me babble about Dungeons and Dragons for a bit here in this. Alright, so back to Dungeons and Dragons. So, I can't think of anything else I've really altered unless I go into the details about specific character classes, and I'm not going to do that, because I don't think you guys care. So instead, we'll talk more about just being a dungeon master, and some tips or advice or things I like doing that maybe you guys can incorporate into your games. So, I like using music in my campaigns, and I have used music in my Dungeons and Dragons campaigns since the 80s, since 1987 or 88 when I first got the red box book. I had a tape recorder at the time. Do any of you know what that is? What a tape is? Oh God, we're dying. Meg does have a decent armor class now, though, so I'm hoping she doesn't take too many hits. Oh, we're at a dead end. I don't care. Oh, thank God. Now we can stay here and cast Cure Light Wounds to get us those back up to full. Yeah, cure critical wounds, healing not much more than what cure light wounds did. There we go. A cassette tape. It would take too long to explain what it is. I will assume most of you remember what cassette tapes are, or can look them up on the internet, since the internet exists now. It didn't in 1980, during the 1980s. My parents had a cassette for the first Star Trek movie, and I would use that when my brothers were in a dungeon, and it was great. And there were different tracks on it, so I would have to rewind and fast forward. But we liked it. I'm pretty sure we all liked it. I liked it. I'm pretty sure they liked it too. I also have to, I'll have to see if I can find. I'm pretty sure that soundtrack is up here on YouTube someplace. And I'll try playing it the next time we get together and see if they remember me playing it when we were really young. Now that I remember, I don't remember rewinding the tape. So I must have just played it on both sides at the time. Anyway, now I have libraries filled with different tracks from video games in order to have a certain theme or feeling for a different area. When combat takes place, it means I'm playing combat music, so something more blood pumping, for example. And I try to theme the music depending upon where my players are. If they're in a dungeon, for example, I'm going to be playing the Darkest Dungeon, like exploring the dungeon theme. I also have a ton of different sound effects as well from a host of different games. The most recent game I extracted a bunch of sound effects from was the Tales of Iron game. Such amazing background sound for like adventuring through a storm, out in the woods, or through a swamp. God, it's just amazing. And I want to play that to really get my players feeling the atmosphere for the area that they are adventuring in currently. And music's important too. On that note, I've been really impressed with the amount of effort that goes into video game soundtracks these days, and the sound effects as well. We've come a long way from the crap that's Dungeon Hack, for example. I'm so harsh on this game. I don't know. I'm glad there's no real music in this game, with the exception of the introduction and the ending. Because I'm positive I would have desperately found a way to disable it at this point in the game. The only reason why I even have the sound effects on for this game as I'm playing it, the monster sounds, is because you can't disable them without disabling everything else. I don't want to play the game in complete silence. And it's helpful to guess, because you begin to recognize what creatures make what sound effects. And when you're first adventuring through a level and you haven't seen the creatures, you kind of want to know what it is that's around the corner. Technically, I guess the creatures also make their sound effects only when you're close by. Or rather, you only hear them when you're close by. So it's useful to tell what is indeed around you. Or some other soundtracks I've used. So, Atlas Madness Returns, The Fortress of Doors, is one of my more favorite ones when my players are venturing in like a creepily themed area. The Vampire Twisted soundtrack from the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines game. That's the one that plays when you walk back into the internet cafe, when you realize that there's some horrible monsters in there, for example. I like the various tunes from Amnesia, that horror game. Tides of Numenera, The Sorrow, is another great, evil, creepy-sounding soundtrack to use. I have several soundtracks from other games which are very pleasant and nice, or happy to hear. SteamWorld Quest has a bunch of soundtracks to it that I really like. I like some of the normal soundtracks from the, like, Felsier Arbiter's Mark. I use ones from Final Fantasy Tactics, or even Final Fantasy VII, or what have you. I Quest for Glory. I've taken all the different soundtracks from various combat and just adventuring from there as well. I can't think of very many games that I haven't enjoyed the music from. And if I have enjoyed it, I'll go and try to rip a few tracks from it. From Planescape Torment, I've grabbed a few of the soundtracks for some of the areas in it, like the Alley of Sighs, right? Is that what it was? If I remember correctly. And just the sound of the wind blowing through some of the tunnels in that game. I really liked using it as well. I think it's really atmospheric to use these things. I had backed a few Kickstarters which provided various sound effects for these purposes. But I've discovered over the years, because it's been many years since I backed a Kickstarter for it, that I just much prefer the soundtracks put into video games to specifically designed soundtracks. The ones I've backed were from a company called Dark Raven, and they're not bad, but I remember intensely disliking how repetitive some of them were with the monsters, like with some of the dungeon sounds. And I didn't like what they did for the sound of wind blowing as well. It's very whistly, and it sounds fake. And I remember really disliking it, the soundtracks that have wind in it, because they added too much of that to it. Thankfully, I have tons of video games I can pull windy sound effects from, so it's not that much of a concern anymore. Yeah, so, another soundtrack I liked there was a tune from the second Alone in the Dark. This tune began the same, but then progressed to two different outcomes, either a quiet end or what sounded like combat music. And I think it was played, I'd never beat the second Alone in the Dark. Actually, it might have been the third Alone in the Dark it was played in. I think it was played in when a creature was around and didn't notice you, compared to when it did. And I would use these two tracks depending upon if my players were camping, taking watch, and then did something interrupt their watch or night. They never knew which of these two tracks it was going to be. Most of the time, of course, they didn't encounter anything bad. But a few times they did, and the soundtrack would just change into the combat music, and then suddenly it's like, it's a monster! with a bit more of a better description than that. It was the idea that my players realize, oh crap, something's actually happening this evening, was supposed to be used. Some other advice I can say as a dungeon master something I do, is when it comes to random encounters, I prefer rolling for something opened the door, I'm running right back to deal with it. I prefer making all my random rolls when it comes to determining like wandering monsters and such of this sort, like or my players are adventuring from a dungeon or from a city to a certain spot, and there's a few random encounters that they're going to have or they could potentially have during that travel. I will roll those random encounters before the game even starts, because I want to know and prep for it before we play, rather than make these rolls as we're playing. I used to do this occasionally, even with all the rolls my players would make. I tried this once or twice, and I think I liked it. I had my players, for example, roll a 20-sided dice 20 times for me, or 30 times, and I'd write down all their numbers in the order that they gave me. And then when they wanted to do something, I would consult those numbers that they rolled and cross them out as I went through them, rather than have them roll at the time. This way, they didn't know what they were aiming for. I never had the problem, though, with any of my brothers or players cheating when it comes to die rolls, with the exception of recently my nephew. For combat, and perhaps you guys can give me some tips on this, I have struggled to get combat, even a small combat, to be wrapped up in like less than 30 minutes. It seems that once combat occurs, that's going to be the majority of a singular session. And I can't figure out what on earth I can do to make it faster, other than let my players single hit the creatures to kill them, but I don't think that's right. Like, I had a combat where my players were fighting 12 zombies and a shade, And I couldn't. When we played it, it took 40 minutes. It just took a long time. I think it's because of how I was doing initiative at the time. Every single new round, I would redo the initiative for everything. Everyone would re-roll their initiative again, and then I have to sort the initiative, all the list in order to make sure that creatures are going in the appropriate time. That's a Naga. That's a Bone Naga, I think is what that is. And I'm worried it can poison us. And for some reason, I think it can also cast spells. And now it's dead, so it doesn't matter. I'll have to talk more about combat in the next time we get together, viewer. So, it takes a while, I think, also because when it comes to combat, we all try to be descriptive about the things we are doing based on the rolls that we make. Because we want to try to imagine what's going on in front of us during the combat. So my players will describe like how they swing, how they block a hit and stuff like that. I'll describe how like a monster like reels from the hit. Maybe they like hit a zombie and they like carve a section out of it, and that's why the zombie misses it on its turn because it's falling on the ground and trying to claw at his foot instead. And it can take a while to talk about combat as it happens. Everyone wants their roles to be described, and to be honest, I love this too. But it just takes a while. I guess I'm not complaining about the effort that goes into doing the combat. I just wish I could somehow make it faster while preserving that. Oh, there's 2 items there. We kind of have to go back there and get them because they could be keys. And if they're keys, we'll want them because they might be used in a different dungeon lower on, below this one. And everyone, we talked for an hour and a half. Holy crap. I've got another minute and less than a half left. So, ooh, an amethyst. Nice. We'll hope that we don't have to use that. Look at the size of that amethyst. Nice sphere cut, too. Looks like we didn't miss anything. We're all done with this hell level. And here's the way down, I think. Yes! All right, everyone. So that will do it for us. Thank you guys for watching and listening to me ramble on about this stuff. Hope you guys found it interesting. I'll go ahead and talk more about some other Dungeons & Dragons stuff in the next one with you guys. I think we'll talk more about just more dungeon mastering things in the next episode. And then after that, I'll talk about the campaign I'm running because to be honest, I want to spill the beans about everything that's ongoing. And I can't talk it with my players because they're not supposed to know. It's really tough keeping secrets as a dungeon master when you really want to share things with the players about how cool things are, and you can't because they're not supposed to know this stuff. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to shut up, let the video play for like the last 40 seconds or so, and I will hopefully see or hear from you guys, or if you guys will stop by listening to me chat about absolutely nothing in the next one. So take care, everyone, and thanks for watching. Or listening. Thanks for listening to all the hissing and the slurping sounds. I'm sure this is what you guys were looking forward to when this series started. A lot of that. Wait till you get to the Ettins, everyone. Wait till we get to the Ettins. You will love them. You'll be glad you hung around until we reach the Ettins. They alone make this entire series worth it. Yep, I'm stopping. All right, everyone. See you in the next one.